Okay, winding up this parallel universe and rotation up to the fifth from the third, it's not going to be smooth all the time. We're going to have irregular emotions, illness, strange illness things, because keep in mind, as the earth shifts to the fifth, our physical bodies as carbon-based structures aren't going to make the shift wholly and totally the same. We're going to have to be open to change. And we have to get a majority of the energy, which I don't think I touched on enough, to accept the energy shift for it to roll up at all. So we're held in the third until enough energetic beings on the planet accept the idea and roll up together. Now as that happens, when the majority finally is reached, the vote is going to carry. So all those energies that have resisted the process or marched against it, demonstrated or lobbied to remain in the third, they're not going to be forced to go to the fifth. What they are going to be is removed from Earth as we know them, shifted back to spirit, and taken into their next evolution on a place, planet, or space where they can continue their spiritual journey at the third or lower evolutionary pattern, the third dimension. So we're going to see a lot of what we perceive as catastrophic events, death, destruction, not really as the universe sees it, or the planet, because the planet wants to roll up. And the planet sort of, if you imagine a giant dog, wet, shaking off a bulk of the water because there's too much, those water droplets that haven't penetrated or evaporated and left the positive part and taken the weight out, they're going to be shaken free. So imagine you're looking at a dog shaking in the sun and you can see all this disbursement of water drops, being flung out far and wide from this dog. Understand that that water hasn't been destroyed. It's not something else. In a sense, the energy that it was here has been moved, but it's still a water droplet. Now it's in the grass. It might be broken into several different water droplets. It may have evaporated in the air. There's a lot of different things, but it's not been destroyed. It's just not on the dog. So if you're sitting next to a water droplet that's suddenly not there, and you saw them flung off through whatever way or means that you believe was their death, if you're still on the dog, your thought is, oh my gosh, we've lost a beautiful water droplet. A beautiful energy is not here that was here. No, it's just not here. It's not destroyed. It wasn't cut down in its prime. And when people get overly upset about people dying young, and trust me, I'm not saying I don't have emotional attachments to people, that I don't feel sadness or sorrow. I do. But different energies are here for different periods of time, and there's different reasons they're here. Some of their cycle runs quicker. We think because someone could live to be 100, we create these breaks of what is young age, middle age, teen years, prime, all of these concepts that we hold. And someone would say they were cut down in their prime because they died at 24. It's wrong. It's sad. We have to mourn it. And some people become angry. I met a woman recently, very angry, because she went to a celebration of life for this young man she was had a very strong affection for, that died in a way she felt was very tragic. And she was angry because she felt they're celebrating his life and not saying it was a tragedy, was a mockery, and was a disconnect, that they weren't really understanding the truth, which was the earth lost this beautiful being who was cut down in his prime. What she doesn't realize was his prime was 6th grade, but nobody knew because we don't know how long we're here for. He did what he needed to do. He came for what it was, and he may be back and he may not be. It doesn't matter. What he came to do, he did. That energy isn't lost. It's just not here in that body by that name. But she's entitled to grieve and feel that loss. If something happened to someone immediately in my family, I would not be without emotional disconnection to make. I would have sorrow, in a sense, because I would lose that immediate connection, the ability to speak freely in the way that I'm most accustomed to communicating, I would feel that loss. I would know it. I would experience it. And I would go through the process to disconnect that, and I would have that understanding that I wouldn't connect with them. However, my ability to move past it may be a little less damaging or difficult because I have an understanding of things beyond that, and because in my work and practice quite often energies that have left the earth in a vehicle pop in to express themselves and often bring the personality of the being they were last in. So I never know if the energies might pop forward. My cousin Michael, who I lamented his crossing, he died at a very young age, 24, I think, 25, himself, in a way that made no sense to me. When my daughter was an infant, my 30-year-old daughter was an infant, I was very angry, but I would have sudden awarenesses even before I came into a spiritual awareness of the truths that I know now, or that I believe to be the truths for me, of his presence. And I would suddenly be sad or cry or think of him or laugh because of the funny things that he did and was capable of. And his name was Michael Hopkins. And he was just this amazing being, so elevated beyond what I was at the time, and so in a knowing, even if he wasn't aware of it. And his skipping off the planet was just the time for him to do that. It just was. And it was difficult for his family because he was really the cohesive bond that held a lot of different energies together. In my immediate family, my sister Carly plays that role. She keeps everybody connected. She buys everybody gifts. She remembers birthdays, and she very often is the one that facilitates 50th birthday parties or events that people can come to. She has a place in Maine we can go to and connect. She kind of keeps a real open door. I do too, but I'm not as comfortable for a lot of my family to visit because my ideas have become a little odd with what they believe. And so not as many come to see me, and that's okay. I accept that, but I do still have a very strong relationship with most of them, and my sister Carly, it's a very strong relationship. So we all have different people in our families that do that, and if one of those beings are ones that cross first, there can be a very big disconnect to energies in the family because this energy of that one person has been holding all these other energies together kind of tightly on this universe, and probably they slip out in several parallel universes, so there's a shake in a lot of universes all at one time as they cross. Now there are some where they don't cross, or they cross differently, or different things might occur because they're connected to different energies in those streams, but there's generally a universal sense of that pattern occurring. So as we go, into that can happen. And a lot of times that's a necessity because there needs to be a spiritual shift for these other energies to either disconnect from each other and become more independent, or to be able to shift up because some are going to shift up and some aren't, and they need to disconnect because the earth is saying, look, I need more energy to shift. These aren't willing to shift, so I need to disconnect them from these so they'll be more open-minded to shift up so we can make this roll. So there are people that are leaving that seem very central key figures because they're holding a lot of energies together. And while that can be a positive thing, sometimes those energies need to be disconnected so that certain other energies can move forward. So be aware, those things are taking place. And we're going to see more and more of these energy shifts going on. Again, I want to put out one more alert, so to speak, and I don't mean it in a way that you have to be frightened or fearful. If you are a medium and you have lots of spiritual connection and they're coming in helter skelter or just showing up and you're giving readings to people with whatever avails itself, and they're just coming in and you're just taking what was brought forward, and what you're telling that person isn't something to evolve them forward on a more spiritual plane, it's just a message like from their grandmother or whatever, be aware that you need to become more concentrated on bringing forward information that's really useful, that you're moving people forward on a path, and you're not accepting messages from just anything. Also, if you're being troubled in your personal space by voices, ghosts, entities, you're not in authority, because you shouldn't be. If you're truly in authority of your space and energy, you should have awareness, but you shouldn't be hearing voices all the time bugging you. Other than what I talked about with this little parallel universe feed through and bleed through, you shouldn't be having all these entities striking at you all the time, giving you messages. And it's sort of like this. I have a very good friend who receives messages from an entity, and at first it was very powerful. And then I became aware that she's been giving messages and accepting messages that I know immediately aren't true messages. And at first I wanted to argue with her, well, you can't. And then I sat on it and I was given a vision. For me to get messages, sometimes they'll try to download in my mind and I'm open and I set on them, but when that occurs I go into sort of a meditative state and I key in and I trace it back to where is that energy coming from. But typically I don't allow messages to come in that way. What I do is I go into a state and prepare to accept messages, and then I go into sort of a trance-induced state, and I go out and seek where I know the messages that I want to receive for what I'm doing are coming from, so I can identify the source. But my friend is sort of more like, the metaphor, the way they showed me is, let's imagine that we're both in a hotel room and we're both open to receive visitors or messages. This is the station where we've gone to get divine intervention, so to speak, although I use that term loosely because it's all from the sonship. I'm opening my door to the hallway, looking out and seeing who I want to communicate with and beginning a conversation and taking information. So I'm going out to find the source. She's accepting messages slipped under the doorway, but that looks to be the same handwriting, so she's assuming all these messages are from the one source or from her guide, because the handwriting and signature appear to be the same. But when she's speaking and telling me some of these messages, I'm very aware that there's a conflict. They're not all lining up. They're not all uniform. What if she agrees to one and that's a true message, then the one she just gave me in the previous sentence doesn't make sense. They can't both be true. So how could that be going on? Because she's not opening the door to see the source. She's just accepting the message. It's okay. It's not harmful necessarily. She'll come to an understanding to be more discerning. But at this point she's not. And when she realizes the imbalance, and part of this is because certain people need to make changes in their lifestyle habits or patterns that they're not ready to make, and that's okay because it's not time, it's not right, but they're going to need to do it to make the shift, but they're not ready. So they want to accept the messages that are proper and right for where they're at because they're not ready to make that change. So the ones that don't demand they make the change are the messages they're more open to receive. That makes sense. But if you're a medium and you're receiving lots of messages, before you give them to someone, before you usher them in as truth or utter them out and express them, sit on them. Sit on them and really engage them. Where do they come from? What's the purpose? What's the end result? How does that fit? Does this make sense with previous messages and what I believe and understand? And if it doesn't, then dismiss them. No matter how they might feel, in a sense, if they don't jive with everything else and you're not ready to shift everything else, then you need to be really a good governor of this energy and why it's coming in. So with that in mind, you have a lot of power and a lot of ability that you're not tapping into. And it could be that you're feeding it out through other sources. People are draining you. People are in your energy stream. You don't know how to govern yourself. There's a lot of different methods, and some previous ones we've talked about ways to do it. And I want to put in a plug for a healer, a natural healer that I've never met. She's never met me. We've never spoken. I don't know her on a personal level, only on an energetic level. I have, I believe, connected with her in an unconscious state through a dream state, and I have been working through some of her understanding on a conscious level. But she is an author of several different books. She's an energy healer with an understanding, very clear about meridians and different things. And she has a book called Energy Medicine, and her name is Donna Eden. And I don't, as again, say I know her on any level in this universe that I'm in right now, in this parallel. But I would say if there's one particular thing that I found that just made sense to everything I was doing and lined up with what I already knew and gave me more information on practically how to help people than I was able to do with my understandings, largely because they weren't translatable to most people through common speech patterns. They were just knowing, and I didn't know how to verbalize them. She has found a beautiful way to put them in print and into practice that the average person could begin to use and see tangible evidence up front. So I'm plugging her because at this particular place in time, I think what she understands and what she knows is highly relevant. I've run slightly over on this video, so I'm going to end now, but I want to end with that plug. I thank you for listening to this series. And the next series, I have no idea what it'll be about, but of course it'll be something to do with energy. Have a great, beautiful, powerful, energized event, whatever that is. Namaste.